politics and Ivy got tales to share. Life in general, we go everywhere. From politics to soul repair. Tune in now, we got time to spare.
All right, so get this. We're diving into Aldous Huxley's Island today.
Island?
Yeah. His utopian novel.
Right.
From way back in 1962.
Yep.
And we've got Alan Watts' two-part lecture on this.
Okay.
And he really brings an interesting perspective to it.
Yeah.
It's, it's not your typical novel.
No, it's not a novel.
It's really more like...
It's a treatise.
Yeah.
It's like a blueprint for...
A Huxley's blueprint for society.
Yeah, like how to construct a society.
Yeah, and with some really thought-provoking ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what I find really interesting about Island is that it's almost a response to his earlier dystopian work, Brave New World.
Oh, that's such a great point.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, okay, I showed you how bad it could get.
Yeah.
Now let's think about how good it could get.
Right.
So what was it?
Yeah.
What happened? What shifted in his thinking?
Well,
I mean, he's known for his cynicism, especially in his earlier work.
Yeah. Well, it seems like his own personal journey had a lot to do with it.
Okay.
He went from this cynical novelist to a full-blown spiritual explorer, maybe influenced by figures like Gerald Heard.
So was this a sudden switch or more of a gradual evolution?
I think it was.
Did anybody call him out on this?
Well, D.S. Savage was a critic who actually accused Huxley of being negative and escapist.
Ouch.
And claimed that his spirituality was just another way of rejecting the real world.
Wow, that's got to sting a little bit.
Yeah.
But Huxley didn't back down from that, did he?
No, he didn't. And it seems like at first he was very much into monolism.
Okay.
This idea that the spiritual realm is superior to the material world.
Yeah.
But then over time, he moved towards a more balanced perspective.
So instead of rejecting the material world, he kind of started to see the spiritual and the material as two sides of the same coin.
That's right.
And so this Island is where he kind of puts that into practice.
Yeah, exactly. Island is his attempt to create a utopia that embodies that balanced worldview.
Okay.
So imagine this isolated island in the Indian Ocean, steeped in Buddhist tradition and also influenced by cultures like Burma and Cambodia.
Okay, so I'm picturing serene beaches and temples and maybe some meditation retreats.
Yeah.
What makes this society a utopia?
Well, it all started when a Scottish doctor happened to treat the Raja on the island.
Okay.
And they struck up this bond, which led to these collaborative social reforms that really reflect Huxley's ideals.
Okay.
So it's designed for human flourishing.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
But knowing Huxley, I have a feeling this utopia isn't all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
What are some of the more...
It's definitely unconventional.
Yeah, unconventional elements, let's just say.
Yeah, well, for one thing, they use consciousness-altering drugs.
Okay.
And not for recreation.
Oh, wow.
But as tools for learning and personal growth.
Can you imagine that being accepted in our society?
Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, we're only just beginning to, re-examine psychedelics in a therapeutic context now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a big one. What else?
Another thing is their approach to family.
Okay.
They have what are called mutual adoption cooperatives.
Okay.
Which are essentially groups of about 20 families who share responsibility for raising children.
So it's like a really expanded version of it takes a village to raise a child.
Right.
That really challenges our whole concept of the nuclear family.
Yeah.
Okay, what else did he throw in there?
Well, he even incorporated tantric sexual practices.
Whoa.
Remember, this is the early 60s, so that was pretty daring.
He was never one to shy away from controversy.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that he's drawing inspiration from real-world experiments, though, right?
He is.
Like, wasn't there a community in 19th century New York that challenged traditional family structures?
Yes, you're thinking of the Oneida community.
Yes.
They practiced what they called complex marriage, which, while different from Huxley's cooperatives, certainly shares that spirit of challenging social norms.
Okay, so he's building on existing ideas, but taking them to a whole new level.
That's right.
It makes me wonder what it would be like to grow up in a society like this.
Yeah.
I mean, they have this amazing educational system that focuses on psychology and ecology.
Yeah.
They even have specific dance forms for expressing negative emotions.
Wow.
It sounds liberating in a way.
It does have a certain appeal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But Watts makes a good point by including all these unconventional elements.
Yeah.
Huxley basically made Island a sitting duck for critics.
Okay.
You know, people might say, well, this is just too far-fetched,
But like,
too radical.
Too out there.
Yeah.
So is he successful
Yeah.
in convincing us that this utopia could actually work?
Well, he's a master satirist.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that.
Uh-huh.
And his critique of the modern world is sharp and insightful.
Okay.
But in terms of realistically portraying this utopian ideal, there might be some weaknesses.
Can you give me an example? Like, how does this play out in his writing?
Sure, let's take a look at two contrasting passages.
Okay.
On the one hand, you have this incredibly vivid, almost disturbing scene where a character under the influence of moksha medicine describes two mating praying mantises, and he sees them as exquisitely grisly.
Well.
Two little working models of a nightmare.
Okay.
And the female actually devours the male's head during copulation.
That's intense.
Yes.
Definitely not your typical beach read.
No. It's powerful, but it's also kind of unsettling.
Right.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have this passage from the Raja's book notes on what's what.
Okay.
It's philosophical, exploring ideas about self-knowledge and the limits of language.
Yeah.
He says, if I only knew who, in fact, I am, I should cease to behave as what I think I am.
Okay.
So a very different tone.
Right.
Much more introspective.
So he's showing us both the beauty and the darkness of human experience.
Yes.
Even within this supposedly perfect society.
Yeah, and that's what makes Island so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It's not a simple utopia.
Right, yeah.
It's a complex exploration of human nature and the possibilities for a better world.
So we've got this really compelling backdrop.
Yes.
But what about the people who inhabit this world?
Yeah.
Does he create characters that we can connect with?
Absolutely. There's one character in particular that Watts highlights.
Okay.
Ronnie.
Okay.
He describes her as a pious fraud.
Okay.
Which immediately makes you wonder what's her story. And
Right.
Watts even says that she reminds him of actual people he knew.
That's always cool when a fictional character feels that real.
Yeah.
What about the main character?
Well, he's dealing with some pretty heavy personal stuff.
Okay.
Probably stemming from a difficult past. But he embarks on this healing journey while on the island.
Okay.
And a young woman plays a key role in helping him to overcome his neurosis.
So it's not just societal transformation, but personal transformation as well.
Exactly.
And they're intertwined.
Yeah. Yeah, and that personal transformation is very much intertwined with the broader themes of the novel.
Yeah.
It's like Huxley's saying that you can't have a balanced society unless you have individuals who are also striving for that kind of inner balance.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like Island is about so much more than just building a utopia.
Yeah.
It's about self-discovery and spiritual growth and, finding meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and meaningless.
You're right on the mark.
Yeah.
That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're not just talking about a book. We're talking about what it means to be human.
Exactly. Okay. I'm hooked. Let's keep unpacking this.
So, picking up on that idea of personal transformation being really essential to a balanced society,
Okay.
there's another layer to that in Island that I think we haven't really touched on yet.
Okay. I'm all ears. What did I miss?
Well, it all boils down to truly understanding ourselves.
Good.
Not just who we are on the surface, but who we think we are.
Yep.
Remember that line from the Raja's book that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Where he says something like, if I stopped behaving as what I think I am, I should know who I am.
Yeah, that one really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's a real mind bender.
It is. It's like we're trapped in these self-created illusions.
Exactly. And those illusions, according to the Raja, are the root of a lot of our suffering.
Okay.
This clinging to a rigid sense of self.
Yeah.
That leads to conflict and frustration.
Yeah, if we're always trying to defend this fixed idea of ourselves, we're bound to, bump up against other people who are doing the same thing.
Right. It's this clash of egos that just keeps the cycle of conflict going.
Yeah.
So what the Raja is proposing is a different path altogether.
Okay.
A path of self-awareness and acceptance.
So how do we actually get there? Does he offer any practical advice?
He does. He talks about the importance of mindfulness.
Okay.
Which is really about paying attention to our thoughts and actions without judging ourselves.
Okay.
And he suggests that simply by observing our internal world, we can start to detach from those limiting beliefs about who we are.
It reminds me a lot of meditation practices and a lot of what we hear in mindfulness circles these days.
Absolutely. It's clear that Huxley was drawing inspiration from Eastern philosophies, that emphasize self-awareness and interconnectedness.
Which ties back to his big idea of, finding that balance between the spiritual and the material.
Yeah.
It's not about choosing one over the other, but seeing how they actually work together.
Right.
And that starts with each of us as individuals.
It does. That harmony begins, with understanding who we really are beyond the stories that we tell ourselves.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Good.
It makes you wonder how different things would be if everybody took the time to really get to know themselves on that deep level.
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? And one that I think Huxley was really wrestling with in Island.
Yeah.
He wanted his readers to grapple with these big questions about self-identity and societal harmony.
Okay, speaking of big questions,
Yeah.
something else that really struck me was the Raja's comment about language.
Oh, yeah.
He said that in religion, all words are dirty words.
That's a bold statement.
It is. What's he getting at there?
I think what he's highlighting is how limited language can be, especially when we're trying to talk about profound spiritual experiences.
Okay.
Words can point us towards the truth,
Uh-huh.
but they can never fully capture it.
It's like trying to explain the taste of an apple to somebody who's never had one.
Exactly.
You can describe it all you want, but they won't really understand until they experience it for themselves.
Right, and I think that's one of the reasons why Huxley chose to write Island as a novel.
Okay.
By using storytelling and vivid descriptions, he could get across ideas that might be too tricky to explain in a purely philosophical way.
It's interesting how he weaves these philosophical ideas together with, compelling characters and such rich imagery.
Yeah, that's what makes him such a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
He wanted to make these concepts accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah, and I think that's especially relevant today when we're, just bombarded with information from all sides.
We are.
We need those stories and images to help us make sense of the world.
Yeah.
It makes me want to dig into Island even more.
I'm glad to hear that.
So
remember earlier we were discussing Huxley's talent for satire.
Yeah.
And how he uses that in Island to kind of critique the modern world.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. How does he do it?
Well, one of the ways he does this is by constantly contrasting the utopian society of the island with the outside world.
Okay.
Which he portrays as chaotic, materialistic, and spiritually empty.
So he's holding up this mirror to our society and kind of forcing us to look at ourselves
Exactly.
and say, is this really what we want?
Right. He wants us to question our values and priorities and think about the consequences of the choices that we're making.
It sounds like he was really concerned about where humanity was headed.
He was.
And whether we could actually create a better future.
He was. And he uses Island to explore different ways of living, thinking, and relating to the world.
Okay.
It's a call to imagine something better.
But even with all these amazing ideals, Island doesn't sugarcoat things, does it?
Yeah.
He still acknowledges those complexities of human nature, even within this seemingly perfect society.
You remember, even in utopia, there's still conflict.
Right.
And you have characters like Ronnie who show us that we can't escape those darker sides of ourselves.
It's a good reminder that utopia isn't about achieving perfection.
Right.
It's about constantly striving for a better, more balanced way of life.
It is, and it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will always be obstacles and setbacks,
Uh-huh.
but I think that pursuit of a more enlightened world is worth it.
So this is all incredibly thought-provoking.
It is.
But let's bring it back to our listener for a minute.
Okay.
Why should they care about all of this?
That's a great question.
How does Huxley's vision, relate to their life right now?
Well, I think Island offers us a really powerful opportunity to reflect.
Okay.
It challenges us to examine our own beliefs and values and how we interact with the world. It asks us to consider what truly matters and how we can create a more fulfilling and meaningful life, not just for ourselves, but for future generations as well.
It's a call to action then, not just to dream of a better world, but to actually participate in building it.
It is, and that starts with each of us.
Okay.
That journey of self-discovery and understanding that true happiness and fulfillment don't come from what we achieve,
Right.
but from inner peace and understanding.
That's deep. I'm really feeling inspired to dive into Island and explore these ideas further.
I think you'll find it's a journey worth taking.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What other treasures are hidden in Island? Wow, we've covered so much ground in our deep dive into Island.
Yeah.
We've talked about Huxley's own personal journey.
Right.
And the more controversial elements of his utopia.
Yeah.
The power of self-knowledge, even the limits of language.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
And what makes it, I think, even more fascinating is how Island kind of fits into the larger picture of Huxley's work.
Okay.
Remember earlier we were talking about how it's often seen as a counterpoint to Brave New World?
Yeah, that really struck me.
Yeah.
It's like he's offering us two possible futures.
Yeah.
a dystopian nightmare
Right.
and a utopian dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in Brave New World, he paints this picture of a world that's totally controlled by technology and consumerism, where people are essentially programmed to be happy,
Okay.
but they've lost their individuality.
Right.
Whereas in Island, he's presenting an alternative,
Okay.
a society that values spirituality, human connection, and living in harmony with nature.
So it's not just a critique of, what's wrong with the world,
Right.
but an exploration of what could be right.
Exactly. And what I find really interesting is that in Island, Huxley seems to have moved beyond that cynicism that was so prevalent in his earlier work.
Okay.
He's not just pointing out the flaws of modern society.
Yeah.
He's actually proposing a different path, a vision of a more enlightened world.
And that vision is very much rooted in Eastern philosophies, right?
Absolutely.
Like Buddhism and Hinduism.
Yes, he was very drawn to those traditions,
Okay.
which emphasize interconnectedness, compassion, and self-awareness.
Yeah.
And he saw them as offering a way to transcend the suffering that he saw as so prevalent in the modern world.
Yeah, it really sounds like Island is like a culmination of his journey.
Yeah.
It's a blend of his Western intellectual background
Right.
with this growing fascination that he had with Eastern spirituality.
You put it beautifully. It's this really unique combination of perspectives that makes Island such a powerful and thought-provoking book.
Yeah.
It's not just a utopian fantasy. It's a serious attempt to grapple with these big questions about human existence,
Yeah.
the meaning of life,
Right.
and our potential to create a more harmonious world.
And even though he may not have, created a perfect utopia in Island,
Right.
he's certainly given us a lot to think about.
He challenges us to really question our assumptions about how society should be structured, how we should live our lives,
Yeah.
and what it even means to be human.
Yeah.
He's inviting us to imagine a world where spirituality and materiality can coexist in balance,
Okay.
where individual growth and collective well-being are prioritized above all else.
And that's what great literature does.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It inspires us. It challenges us.
It does.
It opens our minds to new possibilities.
Exactly. And I think that's why Island, despite its unconventional elements and the fact that it was written, over half a century ago, still resonates so deeply with readers today.
Yeah.
It offers us this glimpse of a different kind of future, one that may not be perfect, but is certainly worth striving for.
So for our listeners who are now totally intrigued by all of this, what would you say to them?
I would say pick up a copy of Island and dive in.
Yeah.
Explore Huxley's world for yourself.
Yeah.
See what resonates with you.
Yeah.
And let it spark your own imagination. Challenge yourself to think differently about the world that we live in.
Yeah. And as you're reading, ask yourself some big questions.
Yes.
What kind of world do you want to live in?
Yeah.
What values do you want to guide your life?
Oh.
What role can you play in creating a more balanced and harmonious society for everyone?
Those are excellent questions.
Oh, yeah.
And who knows, maybe by engaging with Huxley's ideas, we can all take a step closer to realizing his vision of a more enlightened world.
Well said. This has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
It's given me a whole new appreciation for Huxley and the power of his ideas.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to explore these big ideas and share them with others.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Alex and Ivy got tales to share. Life in general, we go everywhere. From politics to soul repair. Tune in now, we got time to spare.